Ladies, gentlemen, and Nightfarers of all ages, last night we had the release of the newest Everdark Sovereign boss in Elden Ring Nightreign, the upgraded and updated Gnoster, the Sentient Pest. And a fun part of this new version of the fight is that we now have an actual name for the Scorpion, as well as Gnoster's the name of the moth, and the Scorpion's name is, I'm not joking, Faurtis Stone Shield. I love it, he's perfect. That said, this is by far the biggest mechanical change of the 3 Everdark Sovereign expeditions that we have had so far, and I'd say as far as pure difficulty, he's probably closer to Adele in my opinion, but he can be much harder than that if you don't understand his mechanics really, or he can be much easier than that if you do understand his mechanics, as unlike the other 2 Everdark Sovereigns, this one is less about massive overarching moveset additions, and more about completely changing the way you think during the fight. So today we're going to go over everything new going on, both in terms of moveset and full mechanics. We will talk about the weaknesses that you can exploit within this boss, what is strong against it and stuff like that, the shifting earth that you should aim for if you are going to use one, the strategy that I recommend taking into the run as well as the characters that are particularly good for this expedition specifically. Then we'll just go over the actual rewards for defeating him, my thoughts on the boss in general, and of course it is also worth noting that at the time of making this video at least, there are 2 very major, potentially run-ending bugs in this fight. And I'm not talking about Gnoster and Faurtis.
Was that a joke?
I suppose.
I'm talking about glitches. Hopefully these will be patched sooner rather than later, as it can be a bit aggravating to do a whole 35+ minute run to then get walled by something that isn't even an actual skill issue, but one of these 2 bugs is avoidable, so we'll talk about that too. First up then, what's new? Well, like the other 2 previous Everdark Sovereigns, Gnoster starts his fight in Phase 2, meaning the Moth and the Scorpion are locked in mech mode just attached to each other. Every time that I've done this fight, the first phase has just been Faurtis doing a 3 charge attack combo, while Gnoster fires off blasts of magic. It's basically just a patience test in this phase. It is easy enough to dodge if you aren't being greedy and going for damage while the animation is happening, so my main advice is to just take this phase a little bit slowly, a little bit carefully, avoid using any unnecessary resources like healing in here. When you get his health down to 0, which should happen relatively quickly as his first phase has a small health bar and isn't very complex, then the boss will die. I'm not joking, he is actually dead. But the fight isn't over though, because that's when the real boss appears, the snail summoner of the fight, if you will, Animus Ascendant Light. This boss is a creepy, more parasitic version of Gnoster in visuals, and it will then revive the other 2 bosses. It slowly raises their health up right around to around half, and during this time you can damage these bosses, however, and it is pretty free to do so. This lowers the amount of health they come back with, and you can also damage Animus during this time for a brief window of actual output, because the proper win condition to end the fight is to kill Animus, to empty his health bar, not the other 2. That said, after the bosses are done healing, Animus will disappear again, and you will be left with the old Phase 1 of the fight, Gnoster and Faurtis disconnected, each doing their standard normal fight moveset, which you are likely familiar with at this point. Each boss will have their own health bar, and when you lower one of them to 0, that's when Animus will reappear. Animus will then revive whichever of the 2 bosses you killed, but in a different way from the first time, as now it will fully infest inside of them parasitically and take over them like a parasite. While this is happening, there is a window of opportunity to apply damage to Animus itself, which again is the actual health bar you are trying to empty to win the fight, and then after this revival animation is complete, Animus will be fused into the boss, which changes how they look visually. It makes Animus take identical damage to the boss that he is attached to, meaning if he's attached to Faurtis and you hit Faurtis, you will deal equal damage to both of them. This is also where you get the new moveset for this fight. A fun part of this mechanic as well is that you have full control of which side of the new moveset you have to deal with. If you never empty Gnoster's health to 0 again, then you will never have the altered Gnoster moveset. Vice versa for Faurtis as well, so you can choose the one that you prefer, the moveset that you want to fight against. Bonus note here is that you only actually have 1 minute to safely apply damage to these bosses. If you do not empty one of their health bars within 60 seconds, then Animus will appear again, undamageable, but launching off a ton of red lasers around the arena before making an absolutely massive explosion as well that decimates anyone's health that's caught in the blast. So basically, this attack is a soft damage check. Do the damage within 60 seconds or get blasted by the boss. Once you empty the health bar and Animus does the whole revival shenanigans, then after around a minute from when the fused boss starts moving after fusing, they will initiate a super strong sort of finisher combo, after which Animus will disconnect from that boss again and you reset to the previous state, which is empty a boss health bar to make Animus damageable again. Repeat this until Animus has an empty health bar and that will end the fight. Victory! That said, this is where the big problematic bugs come in, and again, not Gnoster and Faurtis, but the glitches. I have done 4 expedition for this at the time of making the video, and in that I encountered both of these bugs once, so 50% of my runs were heavily affected. The first one is more manageable and controllable, which is if you empty Gnoster's health bar and he's too close to the edge of the arena when you do it, he will fall outside of the arena, so you cannot go out to see him. Then he will be revived by Animus outside of the arena as well, which then locks Gnoster into an area that you obviously cannot get to because he's not there anymore. You can't even hit him without ranged weapons, and the fix for this is to wait out the timer, because the super attack finisher will happen, and then Animus will then disconnect from Gnoster, which allows you to then have him attached to Faurtis for a reset within the actual movable area, and that sort of fixes it. I've heard of people leaving expeditions as soon as this happens, not realizing that it can fix after about a minute, so that is worth noting in itself, but also you can avoid this happening to begin with by just making sure you do not empty Gnoster's health bar unless you are far from an edge of the arena. As simple as that. The other bug is, at least at this point, less understood and far more of a concern, as there is no actual fix when it happens. In one of my runs, we killed Gnoster, but Animus didn't come to revive him. Then we killed Faurtis, and Animus also didn't come to revive him. And so we just got completely soft-locked on the rest of the fight, which is funny because as far as our screens were concerned, all the bosses that we could see are dead, but the other one just wouldn't come out, which I guess just means that he won. All 3 party members stuck around for exactly 13 minutes before we gave up and just started filing out of the expedition. Literally 13 minutes of standing around waiting to see if something would happen, running to the edge of the arena just in case it would do something, doing gestures to hide the pain, and then we had to just leave each other and go our separate ways because there was just no way that we could work out to fix it. I'm really hoping this one gets patched sooner rather than later, but if it doesn't and anyone finds out some way of fixing this, please leave it down in the comments below for other players in case they actually encounter this bug. As for the movesets themselves, my personal opinion is that Faurtis is much easier to deal with, but that also depends on your group composition. If you have a lot of melee, you will want to focus Faurtis regardless, but if you are more ranged focused, you will do a lot more damage when hitting Gnoster. This means more damage to Animus as well when he is attached to those bosses. That said, Gnoster is much more dangerous with the boosted up moveset, so I generally recommend trying to leave Gnoster alive for the most part at this stage of the fight if you aren't just like completely incapable of dealing proper damage to Faurtis. That said, Faurtis' moveset stays relatively simple even in Parasite mode. His big stomps that normally create a wave of rocky ground spikes is replaced with a large red magical explosion, which is then shortly followed by an aftershock explosion too. So the radius is much larger than the normal version of this attack, and the second pop of delayed damage is new as well. The best way to deal with this is either if you are close to the boss, you just want to run around to the tail or the head, as this always comes out from the side. This can give you tons of free damage windows if you bait it out by standing to the side and then just slip around his back when it happens. If you are further away from him, you can dodge this attack by just simply dodge rolling it, or you can jump it as well, as it is a ground effect. You can even roll the first one, then jump the aftershock to follow up with a jump attack. When you are in front of him, Gnoster has just sort of a slam with his claws that isn't too crazy, but if his target isn't in melee range, he will actually do an aggressive leap directly towards them. If you see him launching himself at you, you want to roll forwards into the incoming bug projectile, because this gives you the least overlap of frames where you can be hit, as the boss and you are moving opposite directions while your iframes are happening. Next up, possibly the most dangerous part of the standard moveset, if you see Faurtis start to sort of shake or vibrate a little bit, this is the telegraph before his roar attack. This roar is longer range than the standard one that he has in non-parasite mode. It does significantly more damage, and it lasts longer. So if you see him start to shake his face and claws, run away from him as fast as you can. That's honestly pretty much it for his actual moveset, as Faurtis is a simple guy, but his moves are quite nasty if you get hit by them. He does a lot of damage. However, he does have one more trick up his exoskeletal sleeve, which is his phase finisher combo. He starts with a forward slam, which causes an initial shockwave and then an aftershock as well. Then he does 3 leg slams in a row, each one causing a shockwave. Then there is an aftershock after the 3rd leg slam as well. Then he does a roar and one last forward slam with some shockwaves before falling over to give you a free damage window against him while they are disconnecting from each other. Next up we have Gnoster, and before we get into his enhanced moveset, I want to note that bringing a poison bolus to this fight fight can be a really big help if you happen to get hit by the grab attack. If he gets the grab off against a player, you will get a brain parasite that you cannot remove by yourself and just keeps you poisoned pretty much, and a poison bolus will just remove this immediately, freely. Or alternatively, when playing multiplayer, you can just get hit by allies, as the parasite that it puts on you has a health bar, and when the health bar is emptied, the parasite gets disconnected. But the poison bolus makes it pretty free, and it means that you don't have to rely on anyone else. As for the actual parasited moveset then for Gnoster, this gets pretty nasty compared to Faurtis. First, his sort of standard magic blast where he fires out 6 projectiles in 3 separate waves of 2 has been replaced with 12 projectiles, firing off a wave of 8 and then a wave of 4 after a slight delay. As a result, the timing on this is slightly different than the base version, but you can dodge this by just rolling twice in a row. Nothing too fancy once you've seen the slight delay and once you understand the timing. He will also do the Cloud of Poison attack, but this enhanced version of it is much wider, sort of a cone of clouds, rather than just a straight line in front of him, with the easiest way to avoid this, like with Faurtis' leg slams, being to either roll forwards under the boss to get out of the cloud, or to just run diagonally forward to get out of the cone with the least movement required. Gnoster also still has access to his grab attack in the parasite version of the phase. However, if he does the grab attack in this, he will do it twice in a row, so make sure that you dodge twice if you see that animation. That's the standard moveset in this phase then, but like Faurtis, he also has a phase finishing combo. His one fires up a bunch of magical projectiles in the sky, and then they start raining down at random before landing and falling all over. After he finishes doing this very drawn out animation, he will flop over onto the ground, and you can get a window to deal free damage before Animus connects once more, resetting to the normal phase. That's the mechanic explained in the new moveset covered then, so let's talk about how to beat the boss. As far as his resistances and weaknesses, both of the bosses are weak to fire damage, with Gnoster being very slightly more weak to fire than Faurtis. The extra bonus fire damage mechanic in this fight is if you hit Gnoster with enough fire damage, he will actually catch on fire and start to take ticking damage, like a poison or a scarlet rot proc. So fire damage is extremely effective in this fight as a whole, even beyond just doing bonus damage to begin with. Strike and pierce damage types are good against both bosses, but Faurtis takes reduced damage from both standard and slash damage types, which is most swords, katanas, things like that. Gnoster, however, does not take reduced damage from these, so you can actually affect your target choice based on the weapons that you have. Gnoster is super resistant to magic damage, like there's no point in using it against him at all, whereas Faurtis is only slightly resistant to magic damage. Both of them are also slightly resistant to lightning damage and holy damage, but with how weak they are to fire, fire is really the only thing you want to focus on for affinities above anything else for this fight. However, statuses or ailments are also a consideration. Both bosses here are weak to bleed. They are properly weak to it, so bleed buildup weapons are very solid. They are also both weak to Scarlet Rot, so if you find a Scarlet Rot weapon, you can apply it to either target for a nice constant ticking of damage. They're both weak to Frostbite, but because of the magic damage resistance and the fact that you want fire damage which would remove the frostbites, that is a bit harder to work around in a practical way, but it's worth knowing about nonetheless. Then a fun note, Gnoster is resistant but not quite immune to poison, but Faurtis is not. He isn't weak to poison at all, but he's not really resistant to it either. He's just sort of in the middle. So you can absolutely poison Faurtis if you have some buildup when hitting him. As for the Animus boss, it seems to match the resistances of Gnoster when it's not connected to a boss. Otherwise, he will just take equal damage to the boss he is attached to when they are being hit, when he's a proper parasite. Some examples of really strong weapons for this fight then are the Cranial Vessel Candlestick as a strike fire weapon with a high damaging fire-based Ash of War that you can spam very actively in the fight. This weapon is actually reasonably common to find for Raider or Wilder if you have a fire camp spawn on your map. Otherwise, generally good fire Ashes of War are great to use here. The Grafted Dragon Fist weapon, a weapon that has Eruption or Flame of the Redmanes, Flaming Strike, those can all do quite a bit. Rivers of Blood or Eleonora's Pole Blade are weapons that have fire damage on their physical attacks, but also a fair bit of bleed buildup, and then apply both with their Ashes of War. That said, it's worth noting that those two weapons are great for against Gnoster, but not as great against Faurtis, as he is again resistant to slash type damage. But generally speaking, if you focus on meaty, high damage fire weapons or fire spells, you can get a load of damage out in this fight, especially for ones that do well against larger targets that can soak up large puddles of AoE damage, like the Fire Whips as well for more dex-focused character options. That said, fire damage is a main goal, and that makes one of the Shifting Earth options clear-cut better than the others for this specific expedition, which is the Crater. This is the Shifting Earth that takes over the northern side of the map. It replaces a couple of Everjails, which is a sad result, but you still get to have the castle on the map for all of the runes and the bosses that can give you, and importantly, all of the mini-bosses throughout the Crater itself specifically have a higher drop rate of fire focused weapons, either fire affinity standard weapons or fancy fun unique fire weapons, which just means that you can pop this shifting earth to guarantee that you are at least going to be offered some kind of fire weapon. Even if it's not the perfect one, you will at least get one for each player. As well, of course, if you can get to the end of the crater, you can upgrade a weapon to legendary rarity for free. And if you can upgrade a fire weapon to legendary, you're pretty much set for your damage output on the proper end boss fight. As for a more general strategy throughout the days, Everjails are still going super strong as the sort of meta right now. The relic effect that makes you gain 5% attack power for each Everjail completed during an expedition is still really, really good, and so I recommend having this absolutely. Ideally, also with a guaranteed stone sword key at the start of the expedition, because if all 3 players have this, you can get an easy guaranteed set of 3 damage boosts quite easily. If you all then have this effect, you should specifically go out of your way to collect even more stone sword keys during the expedition, so you can do as many Everjails as possible along the way, as it is the singular highest attack power buff that you can get without having to rely on RNG. As for Nightfarer choices, your first instinct might be Iron Eye or Recluse for the range, and these are fine if your group wants to focus on Gnoster, but as I prefer focusing on Faurtis myself instead, when fighting him you are better off with big health, big stamina, and big smacky weapons, for which Raider and Wilder can absolutely excel, especially as Wilder has a relic effect that can leave behind fire on the ground after his ult, which just gives him a whole other burst of fire damage, which is perfect for this fight. Executor and Duchess are also decent if you can get a bleed setup going on them, but as both of them focus more on slashing type damage, they are a little bit awkward for this fight in my opinion, as they just get significantly reduced damage against Faurtis, but are generally more melee focused, which makes them hard to deal damage to Gnoster. So that's the majority of the damage opportunity. So this harms your ability to do damage in phase 1, and the safer of the 2 options in phase 2 as well. So my ideal team personally would be some combination of Raiders and Wilders, and then maybe even an Iron Eye or Recluse with fire spells in the 3rd slot to have a ranged option in case you want to lean that direction. But also, both of them just have some really strong team play abilities. The skill that Iron Eye has, or the ultimate art for Recluse. Generally, I'd say that Iron Eye can be reliably good for this fight every single run no matter what, but Recluse can easily outperform on pure damage if you get lucky enough to find a good fire spell. Finally then, let's talk about the rewards. On first kill, you get 25 Sovereign Sigils, and the only new thing that was added to the Sovereign Sigil shop stock is the new relic that you get for defeating the boss, the Dark Knight of the Wise. This gives you 15% increased maximum FP restoration on successive attacks, which is wording that applies to specifically melee attacks or carrion sword sorceries, which count as melee attacks as well. Then the max FP permanently increased after releasing a Sorcerer's Rise mechanism effect, which gives you an extra 18% maximum FP after each Sorcerer's Rise that you complete during an expedition. Overall, this is a really solid FP-based relic, and I'd say while the other guaranteed relic in the shop was definitely more geared towards FP management for casters than it is for melee and Ash of War spamming, this one is much more lean towards Ash of War spammers with the successive attacks effect on it as well. All in all, I actually really like this Everdark Sovereign. It's my favorite of the 3 personally. The moveset changes themselves are a bit more tame, but the fight is just so much more mechanically interesting than the base version, and I think, on the whole, this is the largest shift compared to the original fight of any Everdark Sovereign so far. It makes me quite excited to see what they will do with the other Sovereigns moving forward, and that's pretty much it. I hope you've enjoyed this, and hopefully it helps you out in taking down this newest Everdark Sovereign a little bit easier, even despite the bugs. In fact, to spite the bugs that are Gnoster, Faurtis, and Animus as well. And if you have any further tips than this, feel free to leave them for other players in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.